Yeah, welcome. For those of you who I've not met before, I'm Michelle Mook from Pro Development. We're based in York. We're a SME ourselves, based just near the designer outlet off the A64, and we work with all of our clients across Yorkshire and the Humber. That's our sort of area, helping them with anything really people focused, really, and people development. So that's our real passion. We love working with small businesses, helping them really to get the very best out of their talent, their people, so that you retain your really great talent. You've got great productivity and morale. Our sort of real aim is to help make great places to work across our region. So we do a lot of work around employee engagement. And then, of course, a big thing that engages people is great leaders. And that's really why we've been able to run these sessions through the York and North Yorkshire Growth Hub. So we've been running this series, and this is the last in the series, or hopefully more to come. It's been great to have the opportunity to share really some different tips and techniques around leading others. So great to have you all here today. And I've put our values on there, really important to us. We did a bit of a session in the early days on these, on leading with purpose and vision and values, and they're really important to me and my business as well. So they're on there as well. But great to work with you today, and very much today is looking at empowering your team really. So looking at, well, what are the barriers to delegation and what impact does it have on the team as well? How you can develop confidence and trust in others, some of those key steps for really successful delegation, and then looking at how can we really let go and empower the team to get the very best out of people. And of course, as always, for those that you've been on the sessions before, there'll be some action planning as well, and giving you that opportunity to think about what you're going to do differently as well. So just, I guess, first of all, what would be really useful to think about, if we're going to talk about delegating to others, I guess there's a big piece for me here as well about actually the importance of really for you, how do you prioritize your own work right now? How good are you at doing this? And it might be some things that you've already done before. It might be a bit of a refresher, but just really briefly, I thought it'd be really good to talk about that. And I thought in the chat, I'd really be interested to hear from you at the moment. Have any of you got any really good techniques that you use for prioritizing your workload? So just pop into the chat area. Anything you do right now that helps you to prioritize your own work, because I think that's going to be important before you start delegating it to others. So just pop into the chat area what techniques that you might use, if there's any models you use, or if it's just a to-do list or whatever it is that works for you. So Helen's put in there every morning writing a to-do list for the day. Brilliant. Joe's talked about Teams, using Teams task board. Oh, I've not seen that, Joe. I'll have to have a look at that. That sounds really interesting. Naomi, using the right app, in my case, Asana. So I presume that's like a task system as well. I've not come across that one, so good to hear. Good to, probably make a note of some of these if you've not come across them, because it's really good to see what kind of things people are doing as well. And then Bethan's saying about out of the to-do list, she then prioritizes income generating tasks. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing, Bethan. George, have lists, try and block out time in your diary. Fantastic. Carl, weekly task list ranked A to C in order of priority. I like that one as well. Helen's saying about they have a morning meeting to identify particular needs and priorities. That's a really great technique. A lot of people call those like little morning huddles. And I know, Helen, that's what you do in your business. But yeah, having those huddles and taking that time just to really focus as a team is really good practice. Rachel, different notebooks for different things. Yeah, I have a similar thing, Rachel. That's quite a helpful way of working. And then Liz talks about whiteboard. Yeah, that's great as well, isn't it? If you've got a good whiteboard to write and making sure everybody can see that. Yeah, and the to-do list changing constantly. I think that's one of the big challenges, isn't it, at the moment, is I think actually, Helen, it was you that was saying about doing them daily. I think it's really, really good practice actually to just every day, because at the moment, I don't know if the rest of you are like, but priorities just change day to day, don't they, as well? So what you prioritized at the beginning of the week, it might be halfway through the week things change, and actually doing like a daily prioritization is really, really helpful. So thank you for sharing those. Some really good, some good little systems in there as well. So Naomi, you mentioned Asana. I think I've heard of that before, Naomi. What's Asana?
It's like I project manage most of the time, so it's really handy for tasks and projects. So if you have like a lot of people in your team, and I work with languages, so you know, task and project management, it's really clear and transparent for other teams, and everyone can see who's doing what and who's contacting who about what, and you know, it's really helps us.
Fantastic. And Joe, you mentioned about Teams task board. Is that something that's available in Teams? I've not come across that, Joe.
Yeah, I think it's called task board. I'm not quite sure, but we all when we went into lockdown, because everyone's working from home, the whole company started using it, and it's just an incredible way of collaborating on projects, because you can share your whole list of tasks, and you can have more than one person working on it, and you can update them, so anybody can look in and see where you're up to with that, and you can set deadlines for it as well, and then move the actual task cards to the top of the list depending on which takes priority. And it's worked really effectively. I find it a really good way of managing your team's workload as well, because you can physically see what they've got on and you know, where they're at with each task.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for everybody for sharing those. Some really good tips. I'm going to definitely be looking at, we use Teams, so I'll have a look and see what this task board is, Joe. That sounds really, really good.
It's very much like Trello, if anyone's used
Trello.
Trello's the same principle.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you for that. So just very, very famous model. So some of you may have come across this before. Really just a good, really good tip. And again, it's quite a useful thing to do when you're doing your daily, your daily prioritizing. It's actually using Covey's matrix model. It's such a great model. It's been around for years. It comes from his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but it's just a really good technique to use to really start thinking about what are the things that you're doing that are really important in quadrant B but less urgent, and what are the things in quadrant A that are important and urgent. Sometimes it can feel like people are spending too much time in quadrant A, that they're spending all the time on urgent and important tasks because they're just firefighting all the time and being really kind of dealing with very deadlines and maybe not planning enough. So if you're finding you're spending a lot of your time in quadrant A, there's probably a bit of a planning issue there for you. We should be spending the majority of our time in quadrant B. So in that planning and preparation, relationship building, empowering the team. So again, really important to think about, if you thought about your time and where you spend it, how much of it is spent in quadrant B. Quadrant C, they're often the things sometimes that we can delegate as well. So quite good sometimes to think about, are there some things in the quadrant C that we can delegate? And then quadrant D, the things that are not urgent and not important, there's a bit of an argument there to say, should you be spending your time doing them? Can you ditch them? A lot of those things are activities so that just aren't helpful at all. So really useful model, and I would definitely recommend, if you've not ever tried using Covey's prioritization matrix, it's really, really good for helping you to think about where your tasks sit and actually how much time you're spending in each of those quadrants, and challenge yourself if that's appropriate or right as well. Okay, so working on the basis that we are planning well, we're spending our time planning and doing the right things. This session is much more about then how do we delegate, but I think it's important that we do get our own time planned well. But one of the things that I wanted to just ask you really is just thinking about really how much of a tendency we have for overloading ourselves. So I'm just going to run a little poll. It's completely anonymous, so you can be really honest in it. And I think it would be really good to actually get a very honest response from all of you. How many of you have got a tendency to overload yourself with work probably that should get delegated to other people? So I'm just going to launch the poll. And again, if I can just ask you to add your thoughts into that, it'd be good just to get a feel from the group. So we've had 10 voted, so if we can just keep going. Nearly there. So excellent. Thank you for all voting. I'm just going to end the poll. That's really interesting. I'll just share the results with you just so you can see actually what came out in there. So we've got one person who never overloads themselves and delegates well. So I'll be hoping for lots of contributions from whoever that is, because that's really great to see. I think half of you overload yourself sometimes, and then there's a handful of people often overloading themselves or always overloading themselves. So interesting, I think, definitely seeing the last few months, I think particularly with COVID and the way we've been working, I think a lot of people are, because they're working remotely, forgetting to delegate things to people and overloading themselves and doing too many long hours. And as we've just, the weather's getting nice now, we need to make sure we're not working too many long hours. So thank you for being really honest in that and sharing those. I'll just close the poll. I guess what would be really good to understand then, because the majority of you are either overloading yourselves a lot or a lot of the time, or sometimes at least, what is it that gets in the way? Why do you think you overload yourselves? Just pop into the chat area. What is it that causes you to overload yourself? I'd just like to hear from you. It'd be really good to. So Rachel's put in a really great point there about not having the time to explain. It's often that thing, isn't it? We think, oh, I'll just do it myself because I haven't got the time to explain to somebody else. That's probably one of the most common things we tend to come across. Try to help everyone out, and we've got a small team. So Helen, yeah, I think sometimes we can be so kind to others, can't we, trying to help each other out, but we can sometimes forget about ourselves. It's easily done. We've got finding the right person with the right skills. That's a great point, Bethan, and we'll be touching on that a little bit today actually as well. Lack of trust, I think that's a great point, George, and again we're going to touch on that a little bit as well. That definitely gets in the way. And then Joe, probably similar to Rachel, finding it easy to do it yourself sometimes, just because, by the time you've explained it to somebody else, you feel like, what was the point? Joe J saying, less experienced staff, so that makes it more difficult to delegate. Sometimes, again, George saying about being able to do it quicker ourselves. There's a theme here, isn't there, that we're getting? Lack of time, again, Alex mentioning that. Lack of people to delegate to. Too many incoming emails. Yeah, isn't that just the truth? Email city, isn't it, at the moment? Sometimes think it'd be quicker to do it myself. Again, a similar thing, not confident to delegate. So again, a little bit of that trust thing there as well. Can't communicate my vision clearly, so can't expect anyone else to work out what that is. That's such a great point, George, and we'll probably come back to that as well a little bit today. Yeah, not having an assistant or somebody to do those ad hoc jobs as well, and staff already having busy workloads. So I think, lots of things there why we overload ourselves. But I think probably one of the good things for us to do today is to challenge ourselves a little bit on some of our thinking on those things as well, because we often think people haven't got the right skills or we haven't got the time, but actually it's that self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? The more you do it yourself, the more nobody else is going to learn it, the more you'll then just keep doing it yourself. So there's a bit of a spiral there if we're not careful that we kind of need to challenge ourselves a little bit on as well. Okay, so one of the things that is definitely a big issue as well that people have is asking for help. And it's interesting, I think Helen was touching on this, that we're often in that mode of helping others, and we sometimes forget as well to ask for help ourselves as well. And really just thinking about, if you want to get that win-win outcome, it'd be really good to hear from you. And I'm going to suggest we sort of come off, no, we'll do it in the chat area. So let's start off with you. If you don't ask for help and if you don't delegate, what are the consequences on you? Just pop into the chat area. What are the consequences to you if you're not delegating and you're not asking for help from others? Yeah. Great one, Helen. And scarily, actually, I've just been on a call this morning where some research has been done across a group of 1,000 managers across the UK. And the biggest challenge they're having at the moment is stress and burnout. And I do think a lot of people are holding on to too many tasks, and that's what it can lead to. And as Bethan's saying, yeah, too many hours, feeling stressed, feeling isolated, never going on holiday, absolutely, too much overtime, and that again, that feels like stress. Again, Rachel saying the same as Naomi, not being able to go on the holiday, then struggling to switch off and sleep well, which is definitely a byproduct, isn't it, when we get ourselves stressed, and constantly worrying, feeling resentful. That's a really honest one, Helen, and I think it's a really good thing to recognise that we can then get resentful that we're doing a lot of hours, maybe more so than some of our other colleagues. So there's lots of quite negative things in there, aren't they, around what happens to us when we actually don't delegate and ask for help. And as George has just put, yeah, our work suffers. Of course it does. There's only so much that we can do. So thinking of that on the opposite side, then, it's same thing in the chat area. What are the consequences to your team if you don't ask for help? You know, and you're not delegating to them or to others. What's the consequence to them? Yeah, so George has just put a great one in there. Yeah, they don't develop. Absolutely. They don't get that experience. They don't learn the skills. Alex saying the same. They don't develop. Again, the same lack of development. They feel absolutely, Rachel, great point. Feeling really unvalued. You know, I'm not getting delegated because maybe people don't trust me. They don't value my contribution. You don't let them be creative, they get bored. And that's such a great point, Naomi, as well, that a lot of research shows that people often leave companies because they aren't being challenged and they're getting bored. So actually delegating new tasks to people is really important to keep them challenged and excited and interested and engaged. Andy's saying they don't get the leadership they need, they don't feel trusted. People own what they create. If they aren't involved, they don't take ownership. Great point, George. Yeah, and absolutely going to get a backlog of work as well, aren't you? That then suddenly hits them all, and then everybody absolutely comes under pressure as well. So there's so many great reasons, aren't there, that you've highlighted, both for yourself and for your team, about why it is so important to delegate. And for those of you who are saying you're not delegating enough, I really want you to challenge yourself about how can you do this more, so you can take away some of that stress and the pressure and the not sleeping and the feeling overwhelmed that you're talking about, and then really helping your team to become trusted, feel valued, be stretched and challenged, and give them the opportunities that they deserve as well. So just a bit of a challenge for you here as well. You don't have to say it out loud, but as I'm going through, maybe just make a mental note if this is you, and are you doing this sometimes as well? Do you tend to resist delegating? You know, are you finding that sometimes you're not delegating things to people? Are you immersing yourself in overseeing other people's work as well? You know, are you sometimes always looking at what everybody else is doing? Do you find yourself sometimes correcting tiny details instead of looking at the big picture as well, getting hooked up into some of the minor things? Do you take back work that's been delegated before it's finished because you find a mistake in it and you take that work back off somebody, maybe discouraging others from making decisions without consulting you as well? And I think one of the things that really to challenge yourself as well around this is, you know, are you being a micromanager? You know, if you're answering yes to any of those things, there's a danger that you could be being a micromanager, and none of us want to be micromanaged. It's not great for anybody, and we certainly don't want to think of ourselves as a micromanager. I love that little a little cartoon character there as well. No hyphen in micromanager. Great example of what we've just been talking about. So really thinking about there then, you know, how do you really make sure that you are letting go and delegating to people? And I'm just going to run another little poll, which I am just going to stop sharing those results and go to poll 2. So a few of you touched on this a little bit about how it is that the trust issue, if you're feeling like you trust people and have confidence in them. So again, just want you to and again, it's anonymous, just in there, pop in there. What is it that is in terms of how confident you are in trusting others to do the work? Okay, just one more to vote. I'll end the poll. So again, interesting set of results there. So good to see that nobody's got not at all, no trust or confidence. But again, quite a few of you, some confidence and trust, a handful, little confidence and trust, and just one feel confident and really trust the colleagues. I'm guessing that might be the same person who's quite good at delegating as well. Will be interesting if that is the same person. And George has just put in there about trust varies as well, dependent on people. And again, Alex saying the same, it just depends. Some are more in that micromanaging category. And it's really interesting when we think about micromanaging and thinking about how helpful that is to individuals as well if they're feeling micromanaged, how unempowering that is for people, and how that gets in the way of people's confidence as well. I think when we're micromanaged, we can lose our confidence because we feel like we're not we know we're not trusted to do the right thing as well. So again, it's really good to think about that when you're thinking about if you are finding yourself micromanaging people. So the key thing really with this is really, let go of that stuff and really look at how can you trust and how can you really empower your people, because that is the place where if your team feel trusted and empowered, they will be far more successful and will shine more brightly as a team member as well. When we feel trusted, when we feel empowered, that's what really then helps us to feel like we're doing a great job at work and feeling really valued, as somebody mentioned earlier as well. So one thing I'd like you to think about is when it comes to trusting and empowering your people versus micromanaging, as we've just been talking about, there's this quite useful model which gets you to think about, are you at the far left-hand side where you're micromanaging? Do you ever find you've got that queue of people at the door? Might not be at the physical door anymore, might be more on Teams or constantly ringing you, but do you find that you're constantly getting people coming to you with things? And that might well be that you're being much more directive in your approach, and that's why you've got that queue of people metaphorically at the door. Are you more instructing people and giving them advice and offering them guidance and giving them feedback? Or if you go across to the other side, are you more in that pull place where you're helping people to solve their own problems and taking much more of that non-directive style? So do you really listen to understand? Do you reflect and paraphrase and summarize to help people to develop and grow? So it'd be really good just thinking about that continuum. Where would you say you are on that continuum at the moment? Again, you can be really open and honest in this. It's just within this group. But where do you think you are in that continuum at the moment? If you want to pop in the chat, just where do you think you are? Where would you say that you are sitting at the moment on that continuum? No judgment, just good to get a feel from where people think they are. So that's interesting, actually. Rachel saying different places with different people. I think that's really interesting. Trying to get towards making suggestions and being more push. So kind of sitting in that halfway point a little bit. Again, it depends on the person. Yeah, we've got Andy saying definitely in that giving feedback where you are towards the right, but variable, dependent on staff. Carl saying as well. And again, Joe saying a similar thing, depends on who the team member is. And some sort of saying probably being a bit more instructing. with some getting more feedback and suggestions, and giving advice as well, Liz. Yeah, finding it hard to be. So thank you, Liz, for being really honest in there as well. I think that that's where we get our learnings. I always say the more self-aware we are, that's where we get our big learnings as well. Again, Alex saying probably giving advice as well. So one thing that you could do differently from today is really think about how can you move more towards the right of that. So Liz is saying it's, you know, it's challenging, it's hard to be on move towards the right, but it is definitely possible if we focus. And I think one of the things that we're doing a lot of work at the moment with lots of companies is about creating more of this, what they call this coaching culture, which to me is in effect moving more towards that more non-directive style of leadership. So rather than, it's so easy, isn't it, when people come to us with a problem, to dive straight in, be really helpful and tell them what they need to do. If somebody comes with a problem, we just give them the answer, we give them advice, we instruct them on what to do. And the more we can challenge ourselves to just stop in our tracks and just think a bit differently. How can I use this as an opportunity to help this person? Can I listen more? Can I reflect a little bit more? Can I share with them? Can I encourage them to come to me with some solutions rather than always bringing the problem? So if you get people coming to you with I've got this problem, I don't know what to do, and then literally leave it with you, what can you do? There's a great article. In fact, I'll pass it on, Alex, for it to get passed around the group afterwards. It's called Who's Got the Monkey? And it's a bit like that monkey. Where does Alex knows, because we've covered this, haven't we, Alex? You know, where does the monkey sit? Because you literally see people coming towards you and they've got all the monkeys on the back, and all they do is to just load them all onto you. And of course, we just take them. Yeah, I'll have that monkey and that monkey. And then we get weighted down by everybody else's monkeys. Keep the monkey on the person's back. Don't take the monkey off them. You know, keep it firmly where it belongs. It might be you have to encourage them, well, why don't you go away? Then just have a little bit more of a think about that and come back with some ideas, or go and have a brainstorm with the team on that and come back with some ideas, or at least let's brainstorm it together, but don't get into that habit of giving them the answers, offering that guidance, making suggestions. Really try and push and start to use more questioning. The more questions you ask, the more likely you are to get people thinking about it themselves as well. So just a little challenge for you there. But I think if you can think about how you can move a little bit more to the right, that will be really helpful for you in thinking about how you can start to move towards trusting and empowering your people and stopping that massive metaphorical queue of people at your door, which can equally feel as stressful as taking all the work on yourself. So how do you build trust and empower people then? What are your thoughts? Again, if you just want to pop them in the chat area, what are your thoughts on how to build trust and empower people? I'll give you a minute to have a think, and then if you just want to pop them into the chat area. Yeah, so definitely open discussion, honest conversations. We talk a lot about honest conversations and being able to be open with each other. It definitely helps to build trust. A learning and development culture, George is talking about there as well, enabling people to grow and develop. That's fantastic to see. Give them a task and then support them. Absolutely. Build up the things they take on from small to large. So yeah, that's about developing them again as a person. That's a great point you've made there, Carl. Build a good relationship with them. It's one of the biggest things that helps to build trust. I'm still always flabbergasted when we take teams out and do team building days. I remember taking a team out of 23 managers that we took out walking pre-COVID, and they just didn't know each other. They hadn't spent that time building relationships with each other, and it's so important when you're building trust as well. So such a great point you make there as well. Yeah, again, encourage them to think things through before asking for help. So giving them that. It's interesting, isn't it? When we, you know, when somebody comes to us with a problem and we help them and we give them the answer, in effect, sometimes what we're saying to them is, you need me, I have the answers, you don't have them. It's not what we intentionally do, but it's what we're saying to people. Whereas if you encourage them to go away and think about it before they ask for help, what you're saying is, you've got this, you don't need me, you can work this out. And it gives people confidence. And all we do when we tell people what to do is we rob them of their confidence. So again, it's just thinking, how can you encourage and lift them rather than taking their confidence away as well? Yeah, as Bethan says, it gives them the chance to prove themselves, doesn't it? Absolutely. It gives them that challenge. They get, listen to them, asking them, allow them to make mistakes. And that is such a great point, Rachel. Creating that culture where it's not a blame culture is so important. Yeah, just taking that time to say hello, Carl, as you said there as well. Yeah, know how a person works, absolutely. How do they respond well to feedback or criticism, if you want to call it that? But yeah, how do people like feedback? How do they like to receive praise? We always laugh in our team. I like a hoo-ha when I've done something good, but Sue, one of my colleagues, prefers much more quieter feedback. And it is about understanding what works for your different people as well. And that definitely helps to build trust as well. Fantastic. Some great ideas there. Thank you for sharing. So just a little bit of a plug for the Growth Hub, really. If you haven't seen already, all the sessions that we've been running over the last few months are all actually on the Growth Hub website. We did a session on leading with purpose in November. That definitely helps to build trust if you lead with purpose. We did a session about leading authentically and encouraging vulnerability in December. Again, that massively helps to build trust. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, it lets other people feel, when we make mistakes, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable about that, so our team know that it's okay and that's to be expected. Communicating with impact, as some of you have been talking about. Again, we did a session in December on that one. Understanding yourself and your emotional intelligence, again, really key for building trust and empowering people. We did in February. Building relationships, as Carl was talking about, making sure we make that time to understand people, as well as George talks about there, understanding our people. Honest conversations are recognizing good work, as we've just touched on as well. We did a session in February on that. And healthy conflict, again, I think that's also really important. That builds trust and empowers people as well. And again, we did a session in January on that one as well. And then this no blame culture that we touched on as well. And then, as some of you said, is helping people to learn from mistakes. Mistakes happen, don't they? It is just a fact of life. None of us are perfect. We might like to think we are, but we're not. So again, just encouraging and letting people know it's normal and it's okay as long as we learn from them. And then make sure we give people the tools, the resources, and that accountability to help them feel really empowered as well. And just touching on that, there's just this little model that I wanted to share with you, which you just might find helpful. Just be thinking about how do you slowly move people into this accountability and kind of along that continuum? Do you go from number one, tell me what the situation is and I'll decide? We're trying to move away from that, really, aren't we? And look into this and tell me the situation, then we'll decide together. Then when you've got people from that, move them on to then tell me the situation and what help you need from me to do it, then we'll decide. Then you can move to, give me your analysis and your recommendations. I'll make the decision and I'll give final approval. But then you can start moving towards, you decide and let me know your decision, but wait for my go ahead. Then you can start moving to decide and let me know your decisions, then go ahead unless you hear from me to the contrary. That's really then starting to move into that really letting go. To then you decide and take the action, let me know what you did and what happened. To then really getting into, you decide, take the action, you don't even need to report back to me. So again, really moving into those very high levels of accountability to finally, decide where action needs to be taken, manage the situation. It is totally your responsibility. So, how, again, thinking about that continuum that we looked at and thinking about this model, how can you move? And again, you might map each person. Some of you have said it depends on the person, but just maybe think about, maybe take that model and think, where are people at the moment? How many people have you got in? Tell me what the situation is and I'll decide. And how could you move them along and shift them through this model to help get that accountability and confidence really for them. You know, how great would it be if you had people in your team who just felt they could do what they needed to do, take the action, manage the situation, and just let you know what a success it's been, and that you're celebrating success rather than you having to get really involved in that as well. So again, another just a really nice model to think about and consider when you're looking at how you delegate to people. So I just wanted to give you a couple of minutes. We're just going to go on to do share another little model around delegating. But just before I did, I just wanted to give you a couple of minutes just to have a think about now, because we'll use this, is what tasks have you got at the moment that sit in my task? You can just draw it on a piece of paper. What are the things at the moment that you've got on your task list? And it doesn't have to be work things. It might be home life as well. It doesn't matter. It might be that big pile of ironing, whatever it is. But whatever the tasks are, put in what the tasks are, and then start to think about, of those tasks, could I delegate any of them? I really want you to think and challenge yourselves. Is there something on that list that you could delegate? And I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes just to reflect on that, and then we'll move on. But I'll just give you 2 minutes of quiet to think. Okay, so has everybody managed to identify a couple of tasks at least? And put your hand up. Has anybody managed to identify tasks that they could delegate? When you're looking at your list of tasks. Oh, Rachel, brilliant, has got, yeah, Helen has managed to. Alex has looked and found something. George too. Anybody else got Liz? Very reluctant hand up there, Liz, but it was a hand up all the same. I'm taking it. Great stuff. So if you haven't managed to identify anything yet that you could delegate, really challenge yourself. Is there something on that list that you could be pushing out to somebody else? You know, even if it's a job at home or something, but is there something that you could delegate? I always like delegating the ones at home. I always think those are nice ones to delegate. I'm getting quite good at that with my boys, Rachel. You'll be really impressed. So really thinking about those things. And what I want you to do is, as we go through this next model that I'm going to share with you, I want you to think about that task and think about the questions that I'm going to ask you, because it might help you then when you come to delegate it, which is what I'm going to encourage you to do after the session. So I'll tell you what, we'll come back to that one. So I'm going to just share with you some top tips then for delegating, and I'll give you a bit of time just to think about each one as we go through them. So first of all, be specific and really define the task. So really think about, when you're setting out that task, really clear. And I think it was something that George might have mentioned earlier, that sometimes it can be really hard to communicate that task, to really think about that, but really spend the time. Where most issues go wrong with delegation is when the task isn't clearly defined, where you've not spent that time. You need to think and plan that before you communicate it to the individual. I always think a really good thing to have in your head when you're delegating something is, what would good look like? You know, really thinking, if they'd achieved this, what would good look like at the end? And I would really encourage you to think, if you ever find yourself thinking, that is not what I asked for. Why have they done like that? Why is it come back in that way? That isn't what I wanted. Is look in the mirror, because it's probably that you didn't spend the time defining the task at the start, and you didn't make clear what good looks like. It's scary what you might have in your head and what the other person has in their head. So keep checking as well what that task looks like to them. Get them to tell you what they're hearing. It's such a good technique to use. Tell me when you've specified the task, what are you hearing? Tell me about what you're thinking. Really try and get into people's heads. It'll really help you. The next thing then is really select the individual or the team. Think about, who would this be a good opportunity for? Who's got the right skills for this? Again, when you're at home, who's got the most time? I've got a son at home at the moment with his leg in a pot. I'm trying to find what I can delegate to him that he can do with the pot on his leg. But whatever it is, really think about the individual and really assess their ability and their training needs, but don't use it as a reason not to develop somebody, because it could be this is a brilliant development opportunity for somebody. If you're delegating well and often, it'll help you as well not to leave things till the last minute and then people haven't got time to do it justice if they're learning a new skill. So really think about that and think about the skills of that person, and then start to think about then as well what help they might need as well. If it's a training need, what training can I do to support them around that as well? Biggest thing that people fall down when they delegate is not explaining the reasons. People don't have the context. Why are we doing this? What's the why in there? What's its purpose? What's the reason? Where is it going next? Who am I doing this for? What client is it? Give me some of the context around that. So really making sure we give all the reasons as well. And then state that required result. And that's where that really, what does good look like? What I'm looking for is a 1-page document, or I'm looking for a 12-slide PowerPoint, or I'm looking for a whatever it is, but being really clear what that would look like. And what good would look like. Consider the resources that are required. What resources will that person need to be able to undertake that, and have they got all those resources available? And most importantly, and this is a big thing that people forget to do, is agree a deadline. Make sure that person is really clear when it needs to be done by, and make sure that you give plenty of time and a little bit of space for, if there needs to be some adjustments to it as well. And then finally, that support and communication is so important, is agree that with the individual. What do you need? If you're going to get better at delegating, what do you need to reassure you? Do you want a weekly update, a daily update, a monthly update, depending on the task? What is it you want in that update? Do you need an update? Can you really trust and empower that person? But agree together what the communication plan's going to be, so the individual knows what it is that you're going to need to reassure you around that task. And then please, whatever you do, don't forget to feedback on the results as well, whether that's really positive because that person's done an amazing job. And again, if you haven't seen it, the honest conversation session that we covered earlier this year has got a really great model for sharing positive feedback as well as developmental feedback as well. So make sure you feedback to people what was great, so that they know and they can do that again, and be really specific with that. Don't just do great job, thank you for doing that, well done, because you've already moved on to something else. Sit somebody down and let them know specifically what they did that made such a difference, what it is that contributed to that so much. And then if there is developmental feedback there, again, really be specific. What I'm looking for is more of this, or I need you to consider that, and then make a plan. What can we help you to develop in that? The more you do that, the more it is you're going to develop those skills in people, so that they can go on to start taking more and more responsibility from you as well. So great little model. I love this one. I think it really does. If ever you look back and you think about a delegation that's gone wrong, it's probably one of those bits was missing. Helen's nodding. Yeah, I've been there. So really think about, are you covering all those things? Have it handy, keep it near you. Alex will be circulating a copy of the slides afterwards to everybody. So, just have that handy, and just keep using it whenever you're delegating to people. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour of delegation, but hopefully some little hints and tips in there. But it'd be really good to hear from you. If you want to come off mute, happy to give you a few minutes as well if you need it. But what is it you're going to do with that? What have you taken from that, and what you're going to do differently? If you want to reflect, that's fine. But if anybody wants to share, that's lovely. Anybody had any sort of light bulb moments or a ha-ha moments, or I'm gonna definitely do something moments? Give me a little wave if you've got one to share. Rachel and then Joe. Jay?
So I've always kept doing our invoicing as a business. I think it keeps bit my finger on what's the pulse of what's going on at across the board. But actually, I think what it's made me think is some of our invoicing is quite straightforward and could easily be delegated across, and I could just look at the figures type thing more than actually having to do quite a straightforward task. And I can always separate out the bits that are a little bit more complicated.
Brilliant. So, yeah. I love that. What do you use, Rachel? Do you use Xero?
We do use Xero, but we have our own database that we generate stuff off. So yeah, it's a bit complicated how we have to invoice, but yeah.
Because one of the things I do, slowly moving it, is starting where somebody else is doing them, but you just approve them before they go off.
Yeah.
That's sort of maybe step one, and then step two. Do you know what? You've got this. Go for it.
Yeah.
I love that
type of thing. Yeah. That's
brilliant. Good. Well done, Rachel. Love that. Thank you. Joe J.
Hi. Yeah, I have a member of staff who I inherited from another team, and she had absolutely no confidence whatsoever, not just in her work, but in herself and in her life and everything. And she's been really, really quite difficult to delegate to. And over the years, it gradually got better. But actually, what was really good was when we all started working remotely, because I wasn't just there for her to ask questions all the time. There was a time when I just couldn't get on with anything, and I was pushing. I was just giving the answers all the time. So it's better now that she's working from home, but she's creeping back now into just firing questions on Teams all the time, and I'm firing the answers back. So I'm definitely going to be more of that pull person and coaching and challenge, with questions, and make her start thinking and finding the solutions. So that's the real big takeaway that I'll be taking from this.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
that's great to hear, Joe, and it'll make such a difference to her confidence as well, because sometimes a lot of the reason I've found in my years of doing this, that people ask questions not because they don't know, just because they lack confidence and belief, that self-belief. And of course, all we do when we answer it is we're just almost saying, you absolutely shouldn't have self-belief. Whereas if we push into, you know what, I think I think if you go away and think about this, I think you'll come up with the right answer. So finding something that's going to work for them, but probably having that honest conversation, Joe, as well, about why you're doing it. Your intention is about building her confidence because you've got that belief in her that she's got this. You can do that kind of, I've seen this over the last few months. You've really been doing this brilliantly.
That's really good advice. That's good to know. Yeah, I'll do that. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thanks, Joe. Somebody's just saying they have to leave now, but that's all right, no problem. Anybody else had any other sort of little insights or learns? Carl, and then Liz.
Yeah, I'd say that just what Joe's been saying is very relative to a team member I've got, who's probably one of our oldest serving members, who doesn't seem, well, he seems to have the confidence sometimes, but then other days you'll go away and he'll ask questions that that he has the answer to, but it's hard not to just answer them after all this time. So it'd be really good to sort of turn that back on him and make him sit down and really think about what he's doing. And another thing that was mentioned on one of these slides is, I think, giving back feedback more often to staff, and specifics of what they have done well and what they could be better at. I think I'd really like to do that more with some of our staff. Just so that we've
Brilliant.
got a clearer idea, really, of what they're doing well and what they're not.
That's great, Carl. And again, that'll make such a difference to people. If you get a chance, Carl, if you have a look on the Growth Hub website, have a listen of the honest conversation session that we did, because it shares a little model in there for giving feedback, which you might find helpful as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I will do. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Carl. Liz, you had your hand up, I think, as well. No? I thought I saw your hand up, sorry. But I like you, do it, delegate or dump it. I think especially that D stuff, isn't it, that's in that category D. I think, you know, if it's sitting on that time management in that prioritization matrix in category D is definitely for dump, Liz. I like that. Get rid of it for sure. George is just sharing a reflection there. Yeah, lacking confidence, didn't really know what I was doing. And left me in the deep end. It's the best thing to happen. Yeah, it's interesting actually, isn't it? Sometimes when we're thrown in at the deep end, I think again it's about knowing your people, isn't it, and understanding them. And you don't want to lose people because you throw them in too much. But I think sometimes actually people have often got the stuff there themselves. We just need to give them that opportunity. So I think that's a great comment to make there as well, George. Thank you. So just before you leave, just a little poll for some feedback, which the LEP would really value. So I'm just launching that. So if you can just let us know a bit about how you found the webinar, what changes, if any, you might make, and if you might want to attend other ones in the future as well. That'd be great to know. I'll just let you all fill that. Okay, just a couple more of you to fill that out. Okay. So thank you all very much. Just a little reminder, and again, this is in the slides, so you don't need to read it all now, but we're really proud to have just secured some funding as well across York, North Yorkshire and the East Riding. So there's 40% funding now towards a lot of training and development that we do. So that's, if anybody's interested, all my details are on the slide pack, so just let us know. We're here to help in whatever way we can. But thank you all so much for your contributions. I hope you found that helpful, and you've got a few little actions to take away, and I will hopefully look forward to seeing you again at future events. But thank you all so much. I'll hang around.